Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the AP Academy Professional Development Series this afternoon. We are really excited to have everybody online with us. As you heard, we are recording this session, and once it has finished processing and recording this afternoon, we will post it on our YouTube channel along with all of our previous sessions. So if you'd ever like to go back and rewatch any of these, we have them up there ready to go for you. Today, we are really excited to have Dr. Sherry Prosser from the Erickson College of Education with us. And she's going to be talking with us about teaching skills and techniques, which we realized as we were talking is quite a broad subject. So we're going to see what all we can talk about today. So I'm just going to hand it over to Dr. Prosser. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time out to be here with me. Yes, I'm going to ask you, I have a little poll coming up very soon, so hopefully I can emphasize some parts and de-emphasize others. So yeah, my table is wobbly here. I'm on a really old antique kitchen table because that's my desk now. So anyway, so I hope that's not disconcerting if you're watching this. So I was a K-12 teacher for 14 years. I was an adjunct when I was in doc school, and then also for a couple years after that because I ran away from higher ed screaming, back to K-12 for a bit. And I've been teaching full time since in higher ed since fall of 2016. So I've had kind of a range of experiences. So that's me. All right, so I have a poll here for you to just kind of get a sense of who you are and yeah, what you're just I don't know, the areas in which you teach, how long you've been doing this. So the first question, whether it's hopefully, yeah, can you all see that? Okay, one is answering. All right. Yeah, do you typically, so pre-pandemic, do you typically teach face-to-face, hybrid, online? And then, yeah, all right. So I got 3 of you voting. 4. And then I'll share the results with you when we're done. So I have 5. I wonder if it's going to count. Yeah, so we have 8 guests, so it is. All right, 2 more. And I will, okay, 1 more. So if you want to respond, if you could do so quickly, but maybe there's somebody abstaining, which is okay too. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. So this is what we have in the room. So as far as teaching higher ed, 5 of you 0 to 3 years, and a couple of you 10 or more years. And then, so we have a little bit of a split between arts and letters and business, and then 1 in education. Hi, education. So mostly online. Okay, and so that's been my wheelhouse, the past, since 2016, I guess, and I've done a little bit of both prior to that. And then student engagement and motivation. All right, well, I have some on assessment, but that might tie into engagement, honestly. So, and I geared this a bit toward synchronous instruction. So maybe you can chat in if you have, do you do synchronous online or asynchronous online? Which do you mostly do? Because there's definitely a big difference in those two, for sure. So for those of you that don't have an education background, I'm going to give you like this much of a little bit of information on, some of the things that we're going to talk about, why they work, I suppose. So there's something called retrieval practice, and they are cognitive scientists that have been doing this for decades and decades. So there is, so it's making people recall information, typically in a low stakes manner, versus us just trying to stuff more things in their head. Spacing is when you bring up content throughout the course of a semester instead of teaching one topic in one module or week and then just moving along. Interleaving is connecting those different topics among the semester or throughout the semester. And then So metacognition, thinking about your thinking, and it's kind of a reflective piece, all right? So these are just kind of, some of these are weird words, but so retrieval practice is awesome. And there I have a link here, and I know you guys get these, but if you look up retrieval practice, you can see you can get you'll get a lot of resources, lots of downloadable guides, templates, activities, things like that. Some of it's K-12, but there's some that is also higher ed. All right. All right. So here are just some of the highlights. So with spacing, it sounds a little counterintuitive, but forgetting is a good thing. When your brain has to think to remember something, or go look it up in the dictionary, right? Did you growing up? That makes you remember it better the next time. So when learning is hard, it actually makes you retain that information, if you have that information. And then interleaving, so mixing things up. If things keep getting mixed up, you have to learn how to discern, okay, well, what does this mean? Like, what is a theoretical framework versus a conceptual framework? If both of those things get used all around and in all sorts of places, you really have to know which one is which and why. And that one is, I don't know if anyone is here from math. I know we had a little bit of STEM, so that is big in math for sure. It's like a spiral curriculum where things get hit in like middle school, for example. All right, and so feedback driven metacognition. So when you make an error, you can't learn what you think you already know. So getting feedback and having errors, like, they create teachable moments in the classroom, honestly. And yeah. All right, so here's an example of an activity that you can do, that you can integrate in your class. And I think this would work with virtual or not. I mean, I've used the two things, which we'll talk about in a little bit, in a virtual space. Synchronous, I should say. So going along teaching, pause your lesson, and so just stop screen sharing, say, all right, take out your paper, write down everything that you know about this, or now there's specifics here. You can either set a timer or say, give me 1 or 3 things about this one specific piece. And then you just move on. And it's a little weird, right? But it's making them recall something. And those end up, if you do that fairly frequently throughout your lectures and throughout the semester, that's kind of notes for your students, right? And if they're like, man, I really couldn't think of 3 things, then they know, oh, I probably should go back and look those up after the lesson, kind of thing. So it's helping them to understand how they're thinking and how they're remembering. And if they can't remember anything, like, maybe I should pay more attention. That might be some feedback too that they need. All right, so there is, and then you can add a little bit to it. So with the spacing, you can say, so I've done lectures where I lectured on a Monday and a Wednesday, and on Wednesday I'm like, tell me 2 things that we talked about on Monday. Or not tell me, but write them down, right? And then you can also do what we call, in K-12 at least, like think, pair, share. So you turn to a neighbor and chat, turn and talk. So that adds a different layer of feedback. So what did you have? Oh, this is what I wrote down. And then they learn from each other. There's also another version of that with when you're face-to-face. Write down 2 things that are important to remember about blah. So you write your 2 things, and then you give your paper to somebody else, and they write a 3rd thing, and then you get it back. So yeah, it has to be different from what you already had down. And so it's just ways for them to build on their learning. Here's another example. It's a lot more detailed than this, but it's a tic-tac-toe. This would be more of a whole group activity, although a lot of these could be like face-to-face. These could be done online as well, because you can use like collaborative board or Google whatever, and interact in that way. And we'll do a little bit of that later. So it's kind of like an old school classroom thing where you are playing tic-tac-toe, one team. But the nice thing about this is a team comes up. You have 2 teams, and you can have smaller teams too, which helps, and have multiple games going on at once. But the team comes up with the answer, so it's not like maybe when you were in K-12 school where you got called up to the board and it was on you to come up with the answer for your team, right? Yeah, it's not like Family Feud, because then that's just really terrifying. But if the whole team is coming with an answer, it's a lot. A lot of this is all about low stakes, because, as you probably know, when you're in a high stress environment, you're not remembering anything. Yeah. All right. So again, this online library, lots and lots of good things. They also have a weekly teaching tips that is helpful. Um, so you might want to subscribe to that. All right. So teaching presence. There's a community of inquiry framework, voila, that has teaching presence, social presence, and cognitive presence. So the social presence is like how students engage in the class. So, and this is about online learning. And this goes back to 2000. This is when this was originally created by this group, and there's others as well. And but they're still, this is still very much out there and being studied and improved upon. But so yeah, we're going to focus on teaching presence, but social presence is also a big thing, like how to get students to feel engaged and motivated, especially in an online class. So all of these things tied together, obviously, but what can you do as an instructor to support that? So here are the definitions of each, but we're going to talk about the design, how to design and facilitate your class to have meaningful and worthwhile, discussions and activities and that sort of thing that support your students' knowledge gains. All right. So, for example, Zoom polls. I do, and I know not all of you maybe have those, but and there's something in the chat. You guys might not have a Zoom. Oh, thanks. So, but there are the 30-minute free versions. I record mine, upload them to a YouTube account, and then just set them to anyone with a link. And hopefully, they're not sharing them with friends and laughing at me, but they could. But at least because the problem is even if you have the real Zoom account, those go away after 30 days, which that's not even a spring one semester, let alone an entire semester. So that's why I use YouTube to record. So with just about every sync session I do with my classes, and I teach online only classes, and I have typically 3 synchronous sessions, 3 to 4. So if it's a full semester class, I do 1 a month, which works out to 4, and then with the spring, I'm doing 3, spring 1 rather. And humor's always good too. So, like with the theoretical framework example, you know, yeah, like this is at the end. So at the beginning, I do a preview, a pre-session Zoom. I'm like, hey, what's your level of understanding? Like, I got nothing, or like I could teach this lecture, lady. That kind of. I'm not quite that flippant, but you get the idea. And then at the end, I kind of check for understanding, and also give them a little giggle. So it's nice not to take yourself too seriously. Yeah, and then with the class I'm teaching right now, the hanging in there, are we there yet? I mean, these are super trying times. I know the university is great about putting things out there to help us keep that in the forefront, even though I'm sure many of us, myself included, are definitely feeling those pressures. But having taught these students, they're first year students, and I taught them in the fall, and I have them again in the spring, so I know that there are some that had things going on, and I want them to know that, yeah, I'm there. So, all right. Okay, so what I would like you to do is there's a Google Drive folder. So let me get in there. You can click on this hyperlink. I don't know if are you able to do that? If not, I will put the link in the chat box. And chat. Okay. All right, so hopefully click on that link and that should get you there. If it doesn't, let me know. We're going to be going right to this link a couple more times during this session. So, all right, so I guess I can, let me see who's showing up in there. Is that right? Okay. Have you gone to is everyone going to go into that Google Drive, please? And then you should be able to, they're labeled 1, 2, 3. And if you go into that folder, are you able to get in? I'm not seeing anyone in there.
I was able to get in. Mm-hmm.
Usually it shows you little circles, like how many people are in there with you.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. All right. So if you would, I put all of the sheets in there, the community of inquiry tip sheets, but we are going to focus on the teaching presence tip sheet. So if you would open that document, um, it's the one with the asterisk next to it. And I was going to put 1, 2, 3, 6. It's going to make breakout rooms so you could chat with each other. And then so your goal would be to just look over this document and discuss and note one strategy that you could try and do this semester, and then one that you would like to maybe implement next semester. All right, and I'll give you just a couple of minutes to look at that, and we'll bring you back and discuss. So let me. All right, well, I'm going to continue. So this will be one of the times where we don't necessarily debrief, and you don't always have to debrief, right? And if I have an extended, so sometimes I have them do an extended activity, maybe 15, 20 minutes, then I, as the moderator, I would just bounce in and out of Zoom rooms and be like, hey, how's it going? Any questions? Just like you would circulate around a classroom as a K-12 teacher, right? And maybe as a high school teacher too. I mostly taught like math methods, which again was very much like K-12. All right, so here you go. So 2 things. This is with feedback. So write down 2 things about teaching presence that you want to remember and incorporate for next semester. So just jot those 2 things down, and maybe you did that. Maybe you were taking notes while you were in that meeting, but or in the breakout room. But so jot down 2 things, and then one person from each of your group would type that into the chat box. So not everybody has to. That way, everybody doesn't have to share if it's something maybe people don't want to share. But it would be something that, but at least others can see what the other groups came up with, especially if it's, there were 20 of you here. We'd want to know what other people found to be impactful from that document. So if you want to type something into your chat box as far as what you found noteworthy on that sheet, it would be great. And then, all right. Oops. Okay, so communicating with students. So I got sent this from somebody, and this again is this is something they could maybe use in high school too, because I know they're having to communicate through email a lot more than they used to, and especially our younger students, but even some of our graduate students, they may not know about email etiquette. So this is just an image. I actually came across 2 different ones, and I shared them with my students who mostly are K-12 teachers. And yeah, so setting up a norm at the beginning is really great. And oh, good, good, Allie. So yeah, we don't know what we've not been taught, right? All right. So as far as class-wide communication, some recommendations are to preload assignments for each week or module. Shh, don't tell Allie, but I do this. Allie's in one of my classes, or well, was last year. So, but if so week 1, I mean, when you build your course, week 1 topics are going to be this, that, and the other. So, when that module starts, whether you want to post it on that day or a few days ahead of time, depending on when you open your modules. But just give an overview, like this is what this week is about. Remember, you have this assignment due. We have a sync session next week. Make sure you're saving the date. You can even include a little video clip. I do that sometimes. And then include a transcript if you can. That is definitely helpful for accommodations. And then, so definitely I would suggest using announcements instead of class-wide emails, because for a number of reasons, it helps the students to know they have to go to the course for information versus you getting so many emails all of the time. And then so there's a link here let me see, I'll click on it and I'll put that link in the chat box. And this is definitely from the, yes, I can share that. All right, so this is, Faculty Focus is by far my favorite place to get information. And so this is an article from them, and they said, it's kind of nuts and bolts. It's honestly, if you do the Quality Matters online course, it's similar. So having a start here page, a tour of the course, not sending them emails all the time, because just like anything else, we're just like, oh, delete at some point, right? When you get so many, you're like, I can't do it anymore. And then, yeah, and so a couple other things. I love these. So I have in D2L, so even if you have a blended or hybrid class, I guess you call it here, if you have a hybrid class, or if you, I don't know, if you have a face-to-face class and it's web enhanced, I don't know if you use that terminology here or not, but anyway, there's a course Q&A. So if a student has an assignment, question about an assignment about the directions, or I don't know, maybe there could possibly be conflicting information in the course. I'm not perfect. Then I have this in all of my courses. I ask the students to post their questions there. I'm subscribed to it, so it's going to get to me as soon as an email would, and that way other students can see the answers. And if a student emails me this type of question, I'm like, hey, I'll answer you here, but I either ask them to put it in the email or in the course Q&A, or I tell them that I'm going to do it for them, and just so then it just kind of gently lets them know, like, do this in the D2L next time. It super cuts down on emails. And this is my spring 1 class, and those people are brand new to me. We already have lots going on in there, so that's nice. The other thing I do is a student lounge, and that cuts down on a lot of the superfluous announcements, I guess, which I really like to use those to communicate with my students. But this is a nice place where you can, oh, I found this article that might be helpful to you, you know, related to this other class that we took, or here's like just interesting news or hacks like that. So for example, the how to write a student email, that would have been put in the student lounge and not in an announcement, because it's not related to course content. And so they know that I share juicy bits in the student lounge, and the students are also, you know, they learn pretty early on to share things as well. So anything that they hear that, you know, conferences coming up, anything like that. So it's that kind of stuff that you miss, you know, during a break or whatever in a face-to-face class. So, all right, so tell me, what is your biggest frustration or wondering, like what keeps you up at night, what makes your blood boil, related to providing instruction either asynchronously or synchronously. So I guess it seems to be engagement and motivation, but if there's anything more specifically, let's see, what are we doing on time? 2:30. So, I'm going to try and model this. I have a hard time keeping my mouth closed, but so I'm going to take a few minutes, and if you would type something in about a frustration, and then respond to each other, whether you just say me too, or give examples of things that have helped for you, or yeah. So I'm going to be quiet, because this is a way for you guys to chat with each other. So for me to ask a question, the class to communicate about that topic or question without having to put you in breakout rooms, because you know, it's kind of clunky sometimes. So is anyone else just like itching to talk? But you can in Zoom, right? Everybody, even if there's just a couple people, you end up talking over each other. No, that's great. I mean, gosh, there's only a few of us here, and so even people who are not on, you know, that they don't have their camera on, I'll be honest, I've not done this. So when I was putting this together, I'm like, and I knew I was going to do this months ago, right? So I've just been dumping everything I've come across. I've just been plopping in a folder. And then so the last couple of days, I've been just trying to put it all together. And so this is pretty awesome. I'm liking this. I've never done this with a class before. So this is something that I will be incorporating. Although it does almost make me break out into hives to just be quiet. Not that I'm a chatty person, but yeah, it's interesting. All right, so love this. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have a sync session tonight, so I'm gonna try it out. Okay, so also this I think might help with the engagement and the motivation, the interpersonal because if the students know that you care, because I know I hear from my students that sometimes Allie earmuffs. I hear from my students sometimes that they have instructors that don't respond maybe the way they should. We'll leave it at that. And so that kind of gives you as a student gave me as a student even when we had face-to-face classes. If I think if I didn't feel my professor really wanted to be there, I'm like, well, if you don't care, I don't care either. You know, it kind of gives you permission to check out a little. So anyway, all of that to say, here are a couple things that I do and have done. This is a completely rewritten program, and I didn't plan to do this, but a couple students, when they submitted their assignments, they're like, I really like this, or this part was dumb, you know. And so I'm like, they don't know this is a new class, new program. They're just letting me know how they feel, which is okay. So anyway, I sent out an email with this Google form link, and it's anonymous, but they can give me feedback on like which things they thought were maybe not as important, and then I'm gonna email it to them again at the end of the semester. So and it's in an announcement as well. I included it, so hopefully they see it. But I think it helps for them to know that you don't think that you're perfect and you can learn from them. And I know it might be harder, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. I mean, some of my students are older than me, which is saying something. But yeah, mine are like quote unquote grown-ups, but I mean, 18-year-olds know what works in the class and what doesn't, what they're finding hard and what they don't. I mean, I think their default with some of my colleagues to think of our freshmen, sophomores, juniors as, you know, middle school students, and they're not. They're grown-ups. They have opinions. They know what works for them and what doesn't. So anyway, sorry, soapbox moment. And then this is with my graduate class. I don't know, something happened with the sync session. When I was on a sync session with them, maybe a week or two, something came up about the discussion board posts. And I guess I put the question in the module document, but I didn't have the prompt also in the discussion board. And they said, I don't know, it came up somehow. But anyway, I put it out there to, to the whole class. I sent in an email. I said, if you get, like, tell me what your opinion is. And I'll change it based on whoever cares enough to answer. And so, you know, a few of them did, and they all wanted it the one way. And so I did. I went in and changed it. So I think it shows them, like, if you give me specific feedback, I will change my behavior, which is what I want them to do with their APA formatting. I mean, if we're being honest, right? So if I give you feedback on a paper, I want you to look at that very specific feedback and then change your behavior. So I think it's important for them to see us as learners as well. That's just me. All right, so here are some synchronous teaching tips because I know that was probably been the biggest shift was to go from face-to-face to synchronous. But if you are interested in asynchronous, I got all kinds of stuff for that because that is all I've taught online and remotely, well, because of the pandemic, but even before then, since fall of 2016. So I'm very much used to doing that. So I put you all in, there's only a few of you here, but I put you into 2 breakout rooms because I would think 4 is almost the max unless you have something really complicated going on where everybody has its own role. But 2 to 4 students per breakout room, and then instead of coming back and sharing, which that's kind of a common thing to do, and I've done that plenty, but you can have them record either while they're debriefing, like one person in that space can be using a Google Doc that everybody sees and taking notes for whatever it is that you're having them do in that breakout room. Or when they come back, they can post in the chat box, you know, one person can just post, here's what our group talked about. All right, so here's a couple other ideas that I came across as far as if you have synchronous class sessions. Prior to that, you can put something in the D2L shell, and like say you have a synchronous class every Wednesday on every, let's say, Saturday or Sunday, because most people do their work over the weekend, I think. You can post a question there. They have to respond to that and then ask a question that the teacher will then consider answering, you know, depending on like what questions do you still have about this. Then that helps you kind of build your synchronous class presentation. And then you know, similar kind of thing, if they had to do a reading or something before the synchronous session, then you can, yeah. So we can't talk like we just demonstrated. We can't all talk at once in Zoom. So this is a really awesome way to do that. All right. Okay. So Okay, so this might actually speak to some of the things that have come up. So in our Google Drive, do you want me to repost that link? So in our Google Drive, there's another bucket of another folder, not a bucket, but another folder of stuff. So synchronous teaching strategies. So all those articles are in here. So this one is what? Encouraging engagement during sync meetings. So in my version, it's toward the bottom, student engagement during synchronous classes. And so I've highlighted here the different scenarios that they go over. So if a student logs on but checks out, they go over strategies for avoiding that, and then also how to keep the students' accountability. Or so when you give a poll but people don't vote. So that is this faculty focus thing, love, but it's very nuts and bolts. Like, so those are the 6 scenarios they go. I'm not going to go over them, but I wanted you to be aware of them because I knew we wouldn't have time to do all of this. All right, another thing that is in another topic that is in there is how to make your classes more fun. So could use that. So this and that. So if you are a speech pathologist, or it's an anatomy class because Broca's area is here, Wernick's area is here, so language area. So anyway, if that's your topic, you're teaching anatomy, which one do you like better and why? Like, what a weird kind of question, but then people could chat and like, that's going to be kind of fun, right? And it would get people to talk about, like, to answer the why part, you'd have to say, well, that one's in charge of language and this one's in charge of, they'd have to show some knowledge there, right? To kind of have a discussion. The second one seems a little complicated, but it's 2 truths and a lie, so that game. So that would require some pre-work on your part, and we have enough of that in our world. So a couple of questions. I don't know if you're familiar with the term popcorn because that might just be education speak, but if you're in a normal, regular classroom, I don't know, face-to-face classroom, you call in a student, and then that student calls on the next student to answer the question, and so it's a game of popcorn. In a face-to-face, you can also throw a ball, and so this one I don't. So I'm teaching a multicultural leadership course right now, and so I don't exactly love the ageism aspect of this next question because some people's grandparents might be super awesome and already know bunches of stuff, but it's the student's job, and there's a whole layout for how to do this, but it's the student's job to ask the professor a question, and the professor kind of acts like, oh, what do you mean? I don't know what that is. And so then again, it's like they have to talk through their knowledge. So I like the idea. I might give it a different name. I might say, teach a 5th grader. And then emoji slides, that one has a little bit of pre-work, but it's basically teacher goes through different topics and like you get it, or like, or you definitely don't get it, and then they know what to hit more. Riddles, it's very much who you give a lot of indicators and they have to guess the word that you're thinking of. Role playing, which works well for certain fields more so than others, and collaborative worksheets and ungraded quizzes, and they go through all of the parts of that. So here's some things on assessment, and again, in this article, which is in your Google Drive, here are the different headings. So, the oral assessment, so this is kind of interesting. So I did have a student, so some of my students aren't, I keep putting the same feedback on the assignments, and it's been week whatever now, because they turn in weekly essays. And so, in a couple in the chat boxes, not chat box, but the upload box, text box in the D2L grade thing, not using my words. But I said, please reach out if you have questions on your feedback. And so some people did actually finally, reach out to me. And so it turned out that when I Zoomed with the woman, and it turned out that she didn't understand the prompt. I'm like, all right, well, tell me now that you know what I was looking for, because she left a chunk off of the assignment. And so it really does speak to universal design for learning. So I said, give it to me now, and I will give you more credit, right? Because all I want to know is that you know. And so just giving a backup sort of oral assessment in that manner too is, so anyway, these are really great. And so again, I mean, I don't know, it's my opinion, I suppose, but I had a bunch of these, but I picked only the best ones that I thought might be helpful. I don't know. So, Alternative assessments, so bucket of fun. That was kind of weird. I think it might only work for like health and human performance, or because it's like the teacher says something and then the student has to either act out or dance or show the move kind of thing. So it's if you have a class like that. So lots of this. So the low stakes quiz goes back to that retrieval practice. Like we're definitely all about that. So zine was a new word, didn't know what that was, but it's a self-published written artifact, aka a paper. Just kidding. No, it's not a paper. It's more fun. So yeah, and then instead of having them create a poster that they would share in class, they would create a lookbook. So anyway, there's just different. So the circle map is kind of like a concept map. Some of you might be familiar with that. I've used scaffolded peer review. So in our college, we have key assessments, which are summative assignments that have a very special rubric, and they have to pay money to upload it somewhere else. It's all very complicated. But what I have done in a couple of classes, students submit their first draft to me to give feedback on. It's most likely like a completion grade. But then I also have them post it in their discussion board. And because there's a very specific feedback rubric, and the students have gotten my feedback at that point, they are then assigned 2 or 3 other people in like small groups to give feedback to. So that way, number one, like most importantly, I get a better finished product at the end. But then the students are then invested in. So critiquing somebody else's work helps you know what's expected on the rubric, makes you look at your own work with a more critical eye. It goes back to that reflection piece, all of those things. So I've used that in probably most of my classes and love it. And the students have said too, I did my first semester here, I caught a lot of flack, but I did hear from some students saying that they were glad that I did this because it made them not wait until like the week before it was due to do this gigantic semester-long assignment. So even if nothing else, helps you, helps them. So I do like that whole peer review thing. But again, you have to kind of set it up. All right, so I'm going to, yeah, so now, like if I can be quiet, an activity that you could do is to write down what you remember about retrieval practice and or spacing. So that's called a brain dump, and I alluded to it up there. I showed you the 2 things, so we can do either or, but just take a moment and jot down a couple of things that that you remember about retrieval practice and or spacing. I'll do my best to be quiet. So take like 30 seconds. And Mike, you can be exempt from this activity. Or you can type them into the chat. We could do it that way too, I suppose. But yeah, it's to get them to think about their thinking. What did I learn? What didn't I know? What do I want to remember? You know, or the second one, you know, write down everything. So without looking at notes you've been taking, you know, turn a page and write down all the ideas that you've seen that you might want to integrate, that kind of thing. So that would be the type of thing that we want to. Okay, so we're at 10 minutes. Oh, so we're not bad. Okay, so lots and lots more. So there's 2 gigantic documents. So especially for those of you that are teaching asynchronously, the second one is, so one came out shortly after, you know, so probably came out in April, May, whatever. 20 pages of suggestions. So it's not a little bit of information, but if you look through, you know, and go like, oh, that definitely. But the second one is one that we shared at our previous institution, and it's, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 pages of different ways, but one's a table, so it takes up a lot of space. But it's different ways, instead of asking a question in a discussion board and them like writing a response, replying to 2 other people, that kind of thing. Here are lots and lots and lots of ways to have students process the course material in an asynchronous environment. So that, again, it's just, that's so specific to your content, I think, and yeah, so I would definitely just download everything in that thing. And then also in that Google folder, and Mike, let me get you the link. Let's see. So in that third folder, when I came across these, I don't even know how. I don't know how I don't know where anything I have comes from, to be honest. So, um, but I found these D2L help like tip sheets, and I was like, wow, these would have been helpful last year. But it's basic instructor tasks, like a beginning of the semester checklist. And I don't know if you guys are given courses or if you have to help create them. But even when students have questions, there's a quick how to document. I would post all of these in your, just put them in like a D2 Help module or something. It's a place for students to get started if they have questions that come up. Oh, okay, thanks. I guess I post the wrong thing. So yes, I think those are great, and they should be shared with students. Yeah, maybe they can be part of their onboarding or something. All right, so in general, this is my last slide, but in general, here are I love, 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 love faculty focus. It's higher ed teaching strategies, and I think almost all of the things that I shared with you in that Google Drive folder is from faculty focus. The Chronicle of Higher Ed community section, there's a direct link to that in there. They they have that's teaching advice, that section of it. There's a whole bunch of other things they have in there too. But if you are a podcast listener or if you like to read blogs, those are four that I recommend. So the learning scientists, they are the same people that have that Retrieval Practice website. And then the professoring website is has a little bit of a diversity angle to it, so that's kind of a nice, just different perspective to have. And yeah, and then the first two are just a little more on the generic side, just generally speaking. But they have guests and they just talk about topics. And then a couple of other things that I go to. Well, the last one more so, but I think so the Rice University has a course workload estimator. So if you're in charge of making your course and students are like, you give us too much stuff to do, you can. That's a nice little tool where you can say, here's how many pages of reading, here's what level. Here's how many weeks. This is if it's new material or material they've seen before. Anyway, it's kind of complicated but interesting. And yes, I just like that it's out there. And the professor is in. So if this is helpful to students, maybe to yourself, depending on where you are in your career, but job market advice, like how to write a CV, career advice. So it's kind of for graduate students, but I use it all the time. But I also mentor graduate students, so I really like that. Ta-da! That's a lot of information. All right, so
No,
I'm
that
going to
was
stop
super
sharing.
helpful. Yeah, really helpful. And I just want to open it up if anybody has any questions or would like to share any thoughts that you may have.
The material on the drive is going to stay there for
Yep.
forever, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, eventually I'll run out of space. I actually I'm sort of running, but yeah, it's not going anywhere. I'm not going to delete it or anything.
Thank you.
Welcome, Lacey. Yeah, so
Yeah, and Dr. Prosser, if you wouldn't mind sending me your presentation slides, I can also put that on our website as well, since there were so many helpful links in there too.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I will share when you were talking about assessment and peer review, something that we did last semester in one of my doctoral level classes, which I know is a little different than undergrad, but with a peer review process, we actually all uploaded our papers to a Google Drive, just like you had here. And then we all logged in during class on Zoom, and we would go through each paper and put comments on it together. And so we would each be looking for a certain thing, like one person would be checking for APA mistakes, one person would be checking for grammar or something like that. And so we would comment on specific things going through, and it was so helpful by the end of the night. It was a lot, but it was very helpful.
Did you find you looked at your own work differently after doing that? Like you just practice that critical eye. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, but it was, oh, it was great to hear from so many different people. And I did better in the future too. So, other questions that folks might have?
Again, thank you for coming and for participating. And I got a couple cameras on, which is nice. But thank you for the chat. So the camera on isn't a necessity for sure. That was great. I'm definitely going to figure out how to use that, how to incorporate it. Obviously, it's very easy to use. So I had never tried it. So thank you, Allie, for inviting me and making me learn more.
Well, we're always good for that. Well, thank you everybody so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Prosser, for joining us and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I hope that you have gotten some great techniques that you can incorporate into your classes. Join us. I do want to put in a plug for our next AP Academy professional development session. Our next session will be on Monday, March 8th. So that's in about 2 weeks, also at 2 p.m. And it will be on the Writing Center and the Learning Resource Center. So we'll have Sam Mallory and Erica Arcadia here with us to talk about those two resources for your students. There's been some restructuring there, so there may be some new things that you're not aware of. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week.